Hi, this video is geared towards people who subscribe to my channel. Thank you for your subscription, and thank you for your nice comments. I appreciate them. I'm going to talk about sugars and simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates and fiber. Now, we talk about these things like they're all separate, but sugars and simple carbohydrates are exactly the same thing. There's no difference, none whatsoever. It's like if I take a person, I say Joe Johnson. I say, this is Joe, and I talk about somebody else like Joe, and this is Mr. Johnson. It's the same person. So I think a better terminology to use are saccharides, which means sugar. And a monosaccharide is one sugar. A disaccharide is two sugars together. So let's stick with monosaccharides and disaccharides. Now, a sugar is 6 carbons. And something that's interesting when you look at our metabolism, fats and carbohydrates, it's all based upon a carbohydrate chain, carbohydrate backbone. And so our body can actually turn sugars into fats and fats into sugars because it's all based upon carbohydrates and the carbon chain. But back to monosaccharides, disaccharides. So a monosaccharide is 6 carbons in a circular shape. In our body, it can be linear, but our body is primarily a circular shape. And then it's got 6 oxygens and 12 hydrogens around it. And the difference between like the monosaccharides, glucose, galactose, fructose, it's basically, they have oxygens up here and here, or they have oxygens down here. It's where the oxygen is in relation to the carbon. It's basically the same structure. And what our body does, everything goes to glucose. The body turns everything into glucose for use. So all roads lead to glucose. Now the main point I want to make is that a simple carbohydrate, monosaccharides and the disaccharides, when you just have 2 of these sugars linked together. So simple carbohydrates and simple sugars are exactly the same molecule. Glucose is a simple sugar, glucose is a simple carbohydrate. Let's go to the disaccharides. Disaccharides are things like sucrose and lactose and maltose. Sucrose is a simple sugar, sucrose is a simple carbohydrate. It's exactly the same molecule. They're not different. And I'm guilty of this too. We use terms a lot in nutrition and in medicine which mislead people. And so I'm conscientiously stopping doing this, and I would ask you to do it as well, so we can maybe change the culture of our language towards these things, so people can understand what's going on better. Because simple carbohydrates and simple sugars are exactly the same thing. Now, complex carbohydrates are sugars, but there are more of them linked together. However, I have seen research papers where disaccharides, 2 sugars, are referred to as complex carbohydrates. And technically, anything that's got 3 sugars linked together is called a complex carbohydrate, which isn't very complex. So your sugars and your simple carbohydrates, which are sugars, and your complex carbohydrates, which are sugars, they all lead to glucose in your body, and they all are bad for your blood glucose level. They're all going to raise it. Now, fiber is classified as a carbohydrate, but fiber is not processed in our stomach or our upper intestine. And it doesn't end up being sugar in our body. Now the bacteria can break it down, but we essentially don't break it down. So fiber for me, it doesn't qualify as a sugar, and it's a different category. So when you're doing your diet, when you're trying to manage your blood sugar, remember that carbohydrates are sugars. And simple carbohydrates are sugars that end up going into your bloodstream really, really quickly. Now, I don't want to discourage you from eating carbohydrates altogether, because there are some wonderful foods that have carbohydrates. Fruits have a whole bunch of really nutritious things in them. Vegetables too. There's a lot of really, really good foods that have carbohydrates. But, the empty carbs are they're terrible. And as you're doing your diet, just keep in mind that carbohydrates are sugars when you're trying to do your blood glucose. But, eat a wide varied, nutritious meal, but realize that carbohydrates are sugars when you're trying to manage your reactive hypoglycemia or type 2 diabetes for that matter. All right, good luck. Have a good one.